would among the crowd, you saw strained eyes and lips compressed, it would have been difficult for the most vigilant observer to point this way or that, and say that yonder man had cried out. It was easy to detect the motion of lips in a sea shell. 11:15. Many spectators who had retired from the windows came back refreshed, as though their watch had just begun. Those who had fallen asleep roused themselves, and every person in the crowd made one last effort to better his position, which caused a press against the sturdy barriers that made them bend and yield like twigs. The officers, who until now had kept together, fell into their several positions, and gave the words of command. Swords were drawn, muskets shouldered, and the bright steel winding its way among the crowd gleamed and glittered in the sun like a river. Along this shining path 2 men came hurrying on, leading a horse, which was speedily harnessed to the cart at the prison door. Then a profound silence replaced the tumult that had so long been gathering, and a breathless pause ensued. Every window was now choked up with heads. The housetops teemed with people, clinging to chimneys, peering over gable ends, and holding on where the sudden loosening of any brick or stone would dash them down into the street. The church tower, the church roof, the churchyard, the prison leads, the very waterspouts and lampposts, every inch of room, swarmed with human life. At the first stroke of 12 the prison bell began to toll. Then the roar, mingled now with cries of 'Hats off!' and 'Poor fellows!' and from some specks in the great concourse, with a shriek or groan, burst forth again. It was terrible to see. If any one in that distraction of excitement could have seen, the world of eager eyes all strained upon the scaffold and the beam. The hollow murmuring was heard within the jail as plainly as without. The 3 were brought forth into the yard together as it resounded through the air. They knew its import well. 'Do you hear?' cried Hugh, undaunted by the sound. 'They expect us. I heard 'em gathering when I woke in the night, and turned over on t'other side and fell asleep again. We shall see how they welcome the hangman, now that it comes home to him.' The ordinary, coming up at this moment, reproved him for his indecent mirth, and advised him to alter his demeanour. 'And why, master?' said Hugh. 'Can I do better than bear it easily?' 'You bear it easily enough. Oh, never tell me!' he cried, as the other would have spoken. 'For all your sad look and your solemn air, you think little enough of it. They say you're the best maker of lobster salads in London. I've heard that, you see, before now. Is it a good one this morning? Is your hand in? How does the breakfast look? I hope there's enough and to spare for all this hungry company that'll sit down to it when the sight's over.' 'I fear,' observed the clergyman, shaking his head, 'that you are incorrigible.' 'You're right, I am,' returned Hugh sternly. 'Be no hypocrite, master. You make a merry making of this every month. Let me be merry too. If you want a frightened fellow, there's one that'll suit you. Try your hand upon him.' He pointed as he spoke to Dennis, who, with his legs trailing on the ground, was held between 2 men, and who trembled so that all his joints and limbs seemed racked by spasms. Turning from this wretched spectacle, he called to Barnaby, who stood apart. 'Watch here, Barnaby. Don't be downcast, lad. Leave that to him.'
'Bless you!' cried Barnaby, stepping lightly towards him. 'I'm not frightened, Hugh. I'm quite happy. I wouldn't desire to live now, if they'd let me. Look at me. Am I afraid to die? Will they see me tremble?' Hugh gazed for a moment at his face, on which there was a strange, unearthly smile, and at his eye, which sparkled brightly, and interposing between him and the ordinary, gruffly whispered to the latter, 'I wouldn't say much to him, master, if I was you. He may spoil your appetite for breakfast, though you are used to it.' He was the only one of the 3 who had washed or trimmed himself that morning.
Neither of the others had done so since their doom was pronounced. He still wore the broken peacock's feathers in his hat, and all his usual scraps of finery were carefully disposed about his person. His kindling eye, his firm step, his proud and resolute bearing, might have graced some lofty act of heroism, some voluntary sacrifice, born of a noble cause and pure enthusiasm, rather than that felon's death. But all these things increased his guilt. They were mere assumptions. The law had declared it so, and so it must be. The good minister had been greatly shocked, not a quarter of an hour before, at his parting with Grip. For one in his condition to fondle a bird! The yard was filled with people, bluff civic functionaries, officers of justice, soldiers, the curious in such matters, and guests who had been bidden as to a wedding. Hugh looked about him, nodded gloomily to some person in authority, who indicated with his hand in what direction he was to proceed, and clapping Barnaby on the shoulder, passed out with the gait of a lion. They entered a large room, so near to the scaffold that the voices of those who stood about it could be plainly heard, some beseeching the javelin men to take them out of the crowd, others crying to those behind to stand back, for they were pressed to death and suffocating for want of air. In the middle of this chamber, two smiths with hammers stood beside an anvil. Hugh walked straight up to them, and set his foot upon it with a sound as though it had been struck by a heavy weapon. Then, with folded arms, he stood to have his irons knocked off, scowling haughtily round, as those who were present eyed him narrowly, and whispered to each other. It took so much time to drag Dennis in, that this ceremony was over with Hugh, and nearly over with Barnaby, before he appeared. He no sooner came into the place he knew so well, however, and among faces with which he was so familiar, than he recovered strength and sense enough to clasp his hands and make a last appeal.
'Gentlemen, good gentlemen,' cried the abject creature, grovelling down upon his knees and actually prostrating himself upon the stone floor. 'Governor, dear governor, honourable sheriffs, worthy gentlemen, have mercy upon a wretched man that has served his majesty and the law and parliament for so many years, and don't let me die because of a mistake.'
'Dennis,' said the governor of the jail, 'you know what the course is, that the order came with the rest. You know that we could do nothing, even if we would.'
'All I ask, sir, all I want and beg, is time to make it sure,' cried the trembling wretch, looking wildly round for sympathy. 'The king and government can't know it's me. I'm sure they can't know it's me, or they never would bring me to this dreadful slaughterhouse. They know my name, but they don't know it's the same man. Stop my execution, for charity's sake, stop my execution, gentlemen, till they can be told that I've been hangman here nigh 30 year. Will no one go and tell them?' he implored, clenching his hands and glaring round and round and round again. 'Will no charitable person go and tell them?'
'Mr Akerman,' said a gentleman who stood by after a moment's pause, 'since it may possibly produce in this unhappy man a better frame of mind, even at this last minute, let me assure him that he was well known to have been the hangman when his sentence was considered.'
'But perhaps they think, on that account, the punishment's not so great,' cried the criminal, shuffling towards the speaker on his knees, and holding up his folded hands, 'whereas it's worse 100 times to me than any man. Let them know that, sir. Let them know that. They've made it worse to me by giving me so much to do. Stop my execution till they know that.'
The governor beckoned with his hand, and the two men who had supported him before approached. He uttered a piercing cry.
'Wait! Wait! Only a moment. Only one moment more. Give me a last chance of reprieve. One of us three is to go to Bloomsbury Square. Let me be the one. It may come in that time. It's sure to come. In the Lord's name, let me be sent to Bloomsbury Square. Don't hang me here. It's murder.'
They took him to the anvil,